Perhaps you've experienced the most profound silence there is. Not the absence of words, but the absence of significance. Sarah is before you, smiling politely, but her eyes no longer perceive you as they once did. There's no fury, no animosity, not even disdain. What remains is something far worse: indifference. And Friedrich Nietzsche asserted that indifference is the purest form of nihilism, for it isn't rejection, it's emptiness. When a woman looks at David and finds no substance, there's nothing to anchor the connection, nothing worthy of enduring. It's at that moment many men attempt to plead for respect, believing that acts of kindness, gifts, elaborate speeches, or grand sacrifices will suffice, but respect is not born of supplication. Respect is the inevitable outcome of a particular way of being. It's the quiet result of someone who constructs his own core, even when no one is watching. Nietzsche termed this the will to power, the capacity to organize one's internal chaos, to dictate laws to oneself, rather than living subject to the whims of others. It's the art of not losing oneself in another's gaze to validate one's own existence. Niccolò Machiavelli warned that a ruler who cannot govern himself can govern nothing. The same principle applies to relationships. If David doesn't uphold his boundaries, if he doesn't honor his own priorities, if he doesn't demonstrate stability when life exerts pressure, why should Sarah entrust him with any genuine space? Respect emerges when she perceives she stands before someone who remains steadfast, even when the tide attempts to sweep him away. Today, Dr. Elias Thorne won't reiterate the self-help mantras you're tired of hearing. He will unveil the philosophical and psychological anatomy of the only type of man who truly commands respect. There's a quiet moment when the facade crumbles. David believes he's projecting strength, but what is revealed is merely a lack of control. Sarah perceives that beneath the confident words and calculated gestures, an emotional adolescent resides within an adult body. And nothing destroys respect faster than that sensation of immaturity disguised as maturity. It isn't about isolated blunders, because everyone errs. What erodes the bond is the absence of a center, the perception that David lacks sufficient structure to manage his own impulses. Arthur Schopenhauer posited that desire is an unending cycle of suffering, because whenever one desire is satisfied, another emerges in its place like a flame that never finds rest. The man who lives enslaved by his impulses conveys precisely that fragility. He governs nothing, neither himself nor his choices nor his presence. He chases after scraps of attention, like someone seeking air underwater. He explodes with jealousy at the slightest sign of a threat, revealing that his security doesn't originate from within, but from the reflection he receives from external sources. In this state, no matter how much he tries to assert himself, his essence betrays dependence. Nietzsche cautioned that he who does not master his instincts becomes their slave. And no slave can be respected because respect is born of sovereignty. A man who fails to contain his jealousy, his need for validation, or his haste to be accepted reveals in every action that he has not yet constructed a solid foundation. He lives like a puppet whose strings are controlled by circumstances. Sarah, even without articulating it, quickly perceives this lack of foundation. She senses the void behind automatic reactions and understands there isn't someone capable of bearing life's weight. Respect is not lost due to a specific error, but by the repetition of patterns that disclose an absence of inner order. When a man crumbles under criticism or becomes desperate in silence, it's not the error that wounds, but the realization that no real structure supports his identity. In that instant, she ceases to view him as a potential partner and begins to see him as merely another boy lost in an adult body. There is something silent transpiring in every relationship, something most men don't perceive until it's too late. These are small gestures, unexplained delays, unexpected requests, subtle provocations. They are not whims, nor conscious conspiracies. They are invisible experiments. It's as if the woman is a guardian who instinctively places obstacles in the path to observe if the man before her truly possesses consistency or if he is just another who crumbles under the first pressure. She doesn't announce the test, doesn't write the rules, but she observes intently how David reacts to the unexpected. Carl Jung described this phenomenon archetypally. He spoke of the threshold guardian, that symbolic figure who stands between the hero and his passage to a new stage of maturity. In the realm of relationships, the woman often unconsciously occupies that role, not to destroy, but to reveal if the man is ready. She represents life testing the firmness of a structure, and when the man yields to trivial pressures, when he compromises his values for convenience or fear of displeasing, the message that comes across is clear. This is not yet someone reliable under serious circumstances. Machiavelli had already observed that every ruler, sooner or later, is tested by allies and enemies, and Dr. Elias Thorne begins, explaining that genuine esteem crumbles the moment one abandons core principles for fleeting approval. For David, the dynamic mirrors this precisely. When he sacrifices a work commitment for a trivial request, or compromises his word to sidestep an immediate disagreement, he's not just making a minor concession, he's signaling that his foundation is shaky, that his internal code is negotiable, that his resolve is merely superficial. The truth is, Sarah doesn't seek a pliant subordinate, understanding that servile docility inevitably transforms into hidden resentment. What genuinely elicits respect is composed fortitude, the capacity to maintain boundaries without resorting to aggression or arrogance. When Sarah observes David calmly holding his ground, even when provoked, something profound takes root. It's not about winning an argument, but about demonstrating his inherent stability. At that juncture, her respect stems not from his words, but from the quiet consistency that underpins him. Some men appear robust, yet their strength dissipates under the slightest pressure, like grand structures built on shifting sands. They operate under provisional rules, altering their convictions based on Sarah's mood, the group's opinion, or immediate circumstances. One day they vow adherence to a decision, the next they yield to the first request challenging their resolve. This type of man fails to inspire trust because his life lacks an inherent constitution, an internal law that supports him when everything else becomes volatile. Friedrich Nietzsche asserted that giving oneself one's own law is the most radical act of freedom. It's not about following inherited morality out of conformity, nor bending to external expectations, but deliberately choosing one's own values and embodying them daily, even when unobserved. It is here that respect blossoms. When Sarah perceives she isn't dealing with an emotional improviser, but with someone who has already established a code guiding his choices, this code needn't be loudly declared. It reveals itself in silent, consistent actions. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that robust institutions are more dependable than fleeting charisma. Stable rules generate predictability, and predictability fosters trust. The same principle applies to the human heart. If David shifts his priorities with every new situation, he conveys the message that his word lacks substance. Conversely, the man who establishes unyielding tenets, such as dedication to his health, commitment to his profession, or honesty in conflict, demonstrates that his life is supported by non-negotiable pillars. It is precisely this steadfastness that Sarah recognizes as a sign of inner strength. It isn't cold rigidity, but enlightened integrity. The man who defines clear decision-making protocols doesn't need to raise his voice or expend energy on lengthy justifications. When Sarah asks him to make an exception just this once, he calmly responds, "I appreciate you, but I'm sticking to my training. We can talk later." This simple gesture communicates more than endless explanations. She notes that, under minor or significant pressures, he remains anchored to his own self-defined law. It is this brand of consistency that cultivates profound trust, because it proves that when life demands greater resilience, he won't easily falter. Some men transform their relationship into their sole source of meaning. When this occurs, the weight of their existence is placed upon their partner's shoulders, who suddenly finds herself responsible for fueling his self-esteem, sustaining his motivation, and giving purpose to his time. This marks the beginning of respect's erosion, as dependency corrodes desire. Sarah feels that instead of walking alongside someone with his own direction, she is burdened with a traveler who has lost his way. Nietzsche stated that becoming who one truly is demands a continuous work in progress, a life dedicated to creation and self-overcoming. The man who places his core mission at the center doesn't need to turn the relationship into a desperate sanctuary, because his existence already possesses an intrinsic purpose. Carl Jung complemented this idea with the concept of individuation, a process where a man integrates his shadows, acknowledges his desires, but refuses to be governed by them. In this scenario, Sarah isn't the one dictating his course, but rather someone who walks alongside him, unburdened by the task of defining his identity. This man organizes his life as a valuable portfolio, his body, a source of energy and vitality, his profession, where his work leaves tangible marks on the world, his tribe, a group of male peers with whom he shares loyalty and growth, and intellectual or spiritual creation that connects him to something larger than himself, be it through study, art, or service. This multiplicity of anchors makes him solid, because even when one area faces difficulties, the others uphold his structure. When Sarah approaches such a man, she perceives subtle signals. He responds according to his disciplined schedule, not out of anxiety. His invitations are welcomed, but always integrated into his existing trajectory. His presence, when he is with her, is complete, and his absence doesn't carry the shadow of neediness. She understands, almost unconsciously, that she is not with someone who needs her to survive, but someone who invites her to share. Embark on a journey already set. It's in this paradox, the individual who needs less, that the magnetism of true respect originates. Sometimes, the entire future of a relationship is determined in under 2 minutes. It's not about a lengthy speech or an elaborate test. It's about micro-gestures, subtle shifts in vocal tone, posture, and the ability to respond calmly to the unexpected. Sarah doesn't require much time to discern if she's with someone resolute or someone who dissipates like sand in the rain. These moments of tension function as transparent windows into David's character. Ortega y Gasset spoke of circumstance, the lucid acceptance of what happens, without lament or theatricality. This philosophy, applied daily, transforms into silent strength. David, facing a cancellation, criticism, or an unexpected delay with serenity, demonstrates he isn't enslaved by conditions. He doesn't need to raise his voice or over-explain. He has learned to embrace the event and choose a response that maintains his integrity. This choice is nearly imperceptible, yet profoundly evident to Sarah. Niccolò Machiavelli also noted that a ruler's authority is primarily measured in times of crisis. It isn't when all is well that greatness is tested, but when the unforeseen knocks. A leader who gets lost in justifications, seeks blame, or succumbs to panic loses the respect of their followers. The same applies to David. Amid turbulence, his clarity or confusion becomes apparent in seconds. Sarah registers this signal with the precision of someone seeking security amidst chaos. Respect then blossoms from stability demonstrated in small actions. When David pauses to breathe before responding, when his voice remains low and firm, when his gaze conveys presence instead of evasion, Sarah perceives she is with someone who doesn't easily crumble. It's not the absence of emotion, but mastery over his own internal climate that distinguishes him. Life will always bring storms, but David, who stands like a lighthouse in a turbulent sea, communicates something rare. He doesn't depend on favorable conditions to be reliable. And this realization, grasped in seconds, possesses enough power to redefine any relationship's destiny. In today's world, attention has become increasingly fragmented. Men live captivated by constant phone reflections, scattering their energy across messages, notifications, and incessant validation attempts. This excess not only exhausts the spirit, but also destroys the value of focus itself. When everything is given to everyone, nothing remains significant. Sarah quickly perceives when her presence is just another in a line of stimuli, and the immediate consequence is a loss of respect. Erich Fromm described the distinction between having and being. David, who seeks to collect approvals, contacts, and gazes, operates under the logic of having, accumulating people like objects, transforming interactions into trophies. The respected David, conversely, cultivates the logic of being, a complete, profound, and bounded presence. He doesn't need to be everywhere or respond to everything hastily because he knows his time is sacred. His attention, when offered, isn't generic but deliberate, and precisely for that reason, it gains value. Michel Foucault, discussing surveillance and power, described the panopticon, the feeling of constant observation. Many men live precisely this way, imprisoned by the need to monitor reactions, check messages, decipher silences. This habit externalizes control over their mood. It makes them hostages to others' perceptions. But the sovereign David reverses this logic. He doesn't surveil others, he surveils himself. His discipline becomes the center of gravity. Emotional life ceases to be a puppet of the feed. Aristotle called it hexis, the cultivation of habit that shapes character. Attention for the respected David is precisely this cultivated habit. He designates work blocks, leisure times, moments of silence, and even specific windows for responding. When he is present, he is whole. When he is absent, it is for a clear reason. Sarah senses this healthy scarcity and understands it's not indifference, but priority. His attention isn't scattered in all directions, but concentrated on whom and what truly matters. And it is in that contrast that respect is born. He doesn't chase noise, nor does he try to prove worth through excessive availability. Instead, he builds value through clarity of focus. Sarah then recognizes that his presence carries weight, because it is not common abundance, but conscious choice. There is a type of man who believes he will earn respect by always being docile, always understanding, always willing to yield. He wears the mask of the strategic good guy, believing that the absence of confrontation is synonymous with maturity. But the truth is, this disguise soon shatters. His aggression hasn't vanished. It has merely been repressed, accumulating like silent venom. Then inevitably it leaks out in childish outbursts, disguised ironies, or unfounded jealousy. Respect evaporates, because Sarah senses, even without words, that David flees conflict, instead of transforming it into conscious strength. Carl Jung said that what we don't integrate within ourselves returns against us in a kind of personal destiny. The shadow, with its instinctive and even aggressive energies, isn't an enemy but a wellspring of potency when channeled effectively. A man who denies this part of himself becomes fragile. He lives in internal conflict, perpetually held captive by the fear of revealing anger, desire, or impulses he deems inappropriate. But the man who learns to integrate it understands that it's not about suppression, but about directing what was once chaos. Freud described this as sublimation, transforming raw energy into creative, productive, and civilized action. The rage that once exploded can now become disciplined physical training. The silent corrosion of jealousy can transform into an assertive, direct, and clear conversation. The desire to dominate can become the courage to maintain fair boundaries. At this point, Sarah no longer feels she's living with a volatile volcano and begins to perceive she is with someone who knows how to wield his strength selectively and consciously. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the Dionysian spirit, a vital force that doesn't need to be repressed but guided. True strength isn't about shouting louder, but choosing when and how to act. It is restraint that reveals real power, because it demonstrates that David is not dominated by his instincts, but is capable of governing them. And when David asserts himself with a firm voice, a steady gaze, and concise words, he doesn't need violence to be taken seriously. Sarah respects that equilibrium. She understands that she isn't facing a brute incapable of self-control, nor a fragile man incapable of confrontation, but someone who has integrated his shadow and transformed it into a solid presence, capable of protecting without destroying, of asserting himself without humiliating. This contained strength is the mark of the man who has transcended the nice guy archetype and become truly worthy of respect. There is a decisive moment in every relationship where a man's worth is measured not by what he accepts, but by what he is willing to forego. Respect doesn't flourish where everything is permitted, where boundaries are constantly negotiated, where the threat of loss paralyzes every gesture. Respect is born precisely from the clarity that some things can be lost, and that integrity does not bend to the fear of abandonment. Søren Kierkegaard said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, because choosing always means renouncing, and no man can be respected if he lacks the courage to live with that dizziness. Niccolò Machiavelli reminded us that one who depends exclusively on fortune, luck, or others' whims is condemned to instability. Virtù for him wasn't moral virtue, but the capacity to act with cunning and determination for the worst-case scenario. It is the ability not to be swept away by the tides, but to maintain principles even in adversity. The same applies in emotional matters. David, who accepts everything in the name of preserving the relationship, has already lost even before separation, because his dignity was traded for false security. David, who stands firm despite the risk, even if it costs the relationship, demonstrates virtù. José Ortega y Gasset, for his part, taught that affirming one's values also implies negating what contradicts them. Saying yes to one path inevitably means saying no to all the detours that threaten that journey. Such renunciation is not weakness, but the clearest proof of sovereignty. David, who manages to withdraw with dignity from a situation that no longer aligns with his principles, demonstrates that his life is greater than any specific bond. And when this happens, something paradoxical emerges. Sarah perceives that she is not with someone trapped by need, but with someone liberated by choice. The courage to lose transforms his presence into value. He doesn't stay because he fears loneliness, but because he consciously chose to remain, and, if necessary, he will also choose to leave. In that moment, even if the relationship ends, respect does not dissolve, because respect is born, ultimately, from the dignity of upholding a choice, even when it demands sacrifice. Our point arrives where it becomes clear. Respect is not something extorted by force, nor bought with theatrical gestures of seduction. Respect is an inevitable collateral effect of a structured life. Friedrich Nietzsche reminded us that the truly free man is he who governs himself, and that the will to power begins with self-mastery. Sarah may not quote Nietzsche, but she senses this in every gesture. She doesn't respect promises, but the silent consistency David maintains when no one is watching. Niccolò Machiavelli warned that a prince who attempts to appear feared, but lacks internal control, soon loses his authority. The same applies to David, who tries to stage power without grounding it in practice. Respect doesn't originate from a mask, but from substance. It accumulates in daily rituals, in body discipline, in consistent work, in clear boundaries, in the courage to lose in order not to lose oneself. Respect is, ultimately, a consequence of the invisible architecture you build within yourself. And here is the truth no one dares to say. Being respected isn't about conquering something external, but about becoming someone impossible to ignore. A structured man does not. David never begs for attention, nor does he sensationalize his existence. He doesn't stoop to pleading for validation. Instead, he simply abides by his own principles, and this unwavering consistency naturally commands respect. If these words resonate with you, take a moment to truly consider their implications. Here we don't shy away from the darker aspects of the self. Rather, we strive for their complete integration. May your intellect always remain sharp and clear. May your inherent truth be the very blade that slices through every illusion, seeking to confine you within the bounds of mediocrity. Dr. Elias Thorne once observed, "Many mistake emotional turbulence for passion. True strength lies in the calm application of will." David embodies this quiet power, a man whose internal compass guides him without external calibration. He understands, as Friedrich Nietzsche articulated, the will to power is not a desire to dominate others, but a drive for self-overcoming and self-mastery. This internal fortitude eliminates any need for external approval. His interactions with Sarah are a testament to this. He doesn't project his needs onto her, nor does he allow her perception to define his worth. Their connection is built on a foundation of mutual earned respect, not emotional dependency. Arthur Schopenhauer cautioned against living solely in the opinions of others, stating it makes one a slave. David's freedom stems from his resolute self-sufficiency, a refusal to be swayed by fleeting external judgments. This isn't about arrogance, It's about a deeply rooted sense of self-possession. He respects Sarah not by fawning over her, but by recognizing her independent spirit and fostering an environment where both can flourish authentically. Niccolò Machiavelli, in a different context, spoke of the importance of being feared rather than loved, if one cannot be both. David, however, cultivates respect through genuine integrity and an unyielding commitment to his own values. He navigates the complexities of relationships with a quiet confidence. He knows the art of not losing himself in another's gaze to validate his own existence, a crucial boundary for any mature connection. Carl Jung's concept of the threshold guardian suggests challenges that test our resolve. David faces these internal and external tests not by avoiding them, but by integrating their lessons, emerging stronger and more coherent. This path is not always comfortable. It demands introspection and a willingness to confront one's own imperfections. Yet it promises a profound sense of self-worth that is unshaken by external circumstances. To truly honor yourself is to understand that your value is inherent, not conferred. It's a constant process of refining your character and aligning your actions with your deepest convictions. Let these insights serve as a catalyst for your own journey. Embrace the wisdom that compels you to look inward and build a life of purpose and genuine esteem. Your liberation begins with this commitment to self,